Welcome to our podcast, Resilient Heroes, where we are dedicated to showcasing the incredible journeys and contributions of women in the field of emergency management. I'm your host, Laura James. Welcome back to Resilient Heroes, the podcast that shines a light on extraordinary women who embody resilience in every sense of the word, from boots on the ground in disaster zones to EOCs. I'm your host, Laura James. Today's guest is nothing short of a legend in global emergency response. Lynn Waterfall is a registered nurse and rapid response manager with Canadian Red Cross. She specializes in women's and reproductive health and has deployed to some of the most challenging environments on Earth beyond North America, including Jordan, Nepal, Mozambique, and beyond. She's provided care and training in the aftermath of devastation, experienced a 7.3 magnitude earthquake, delivered babies by headlamp, and helped build capacity and hope by training communities of women in their most desperate hours. From health systems to human compassion, from trauma to tattoos, today we're going to talk about the human side of humanitarian work. Lynn, welcome to Resilient Heroes. It's truly an honor to have you with us here.
Thank you so much for inviting me, Laura.
So I'd really love to start with this. What inspired you to pursue a career in emergency management? And really more specifically, what sparked your interest in international health response?
I've always felt incredibly fortunate to have been born in Canada, with
Yes.
opportunities for education and wellness. And I feel like I've won the only lottery that matters. So
Yes.
with that win comes a responsibility to others that were not as fortunate through no fault of their own. I have the knowledge and training of nursing, and it makes sense to be able to share that with the people who need the most support. And we're all global citizens, and we get to decide what kind of global citizens we want to be.
That's so true. And so most of us on Resilient Heroes, we find ourselves in emergency management through winding paths. And I know sort of the same thing has happened to you. So tell our listeners more about your background in nursing and then how you transitioned into these international deployments.
So I've been a registered nurse since 1997. And as a young nurse, I enjoyed the adrenaline and the chaos of emergency departments. And I traveled to work in the UK as well as the US because I was always looking for the next adventure.
Yeah,
Yeah. And suddenly having three children and getting married slowed that down, of course.
of course.
Um, yeah. And I gravitated toward maternal child nursing.
Okay.
I felt a need to support women when they are at their most vulnerable. Of course, the drive for adventure and chaos was always simmering in the back of my mind. And so the opportunity to be an international delegate spoke to that drive as well as the need to support the most vulnerable people.
And can you identify sort of what was that, like the burning need? It's because of you've always had that in the back of your mind?
Uh, Needing chaos or needing to help people.
Chaos.
I don't know. I feel like I'm kind of chaos bundled in a little 5'2" body, and I have trouble being still. I'm getting better as I get older, but I just feel like there's so many things out there, and how do you just be still and let them all go by?
Yeah. And when you said little 5'2", you are the chaos coordinator in a small package.
Right, right.
So what was your first international deployment outside of Canada?
I went to Jordan actually, and it was to set up a hospital in a new refugee camp that was being built. And it was a multinational team. We went in, we set it up, and we thought the camp would be opening any minute now, and it didn't open for another 2 years after we left, but it was an excellent learning opportunity, a great low stress first mission, and I
Mhm.
learned a lot.
That's the perfect first mission, is a learning mission where you don't feel under so much stress. So I know from our chats that you've been on countless international missions. So can you share a moment with our listeners? And I know you have so many that really tested you emotionally, physically, your skill sets, but also showed why your work matters.
Yeah, so I was deployed to a large refugee camp in Southeast Asia, and I was part of a small team that was hiking in Delhi to provide primary health care through a mobile clinic. We were living in a base camp near the border, and we learned that the border was going to be open late at night to let more people into the country. And because it was so late, they would be walking along the road until they reached an open area that had empty tents and nothing else. There's no lights, no one to greet them, no support systems, food, or any care until the morning.
Hmm.
So our team gained permission to be at that site when they arrived, and
In
we
the middle of the
quickly set
night.
in the middle of the night, yeah,
Yep.
which is hard to do with security rules, but we were granted access, and we set up a triage system and plans to provide basic medical care on site and transport those who needed more care to the nearby field hospital. Now, we had drivers and volunteer interpreters that were local, and they had finished their day's work, but they still willingly came with us, shining their vehicle lights for us to see and interpreting with all the people as they arrived. So, that meant so much, right? Like they're there in a job, and this was above and beyond what they needed to do, and they all willingly just stepped up and said, "Of course, we're coming with you."
And I
Um,
mean, that's a global movement that we always see. And we say it in emergency management all the time, but responses start and end at the local level. And that's a perfect example of something where people had done their job for the day in the local community and they're exhausted. They want their own time, but they know that you're there working for the people. And so they're volunteering to be part of that. So that's amazing. And you then you're all on a combined mission, whether there's a language barrier, whether it's the middle of the night. So thank you for sharing that. Your volunteers were volunteering.
yeah, exactly, and it's so good to be part of a team like that.
Hmm.
Um, but the sight of the people arriving as they walked across the border, that remains the most heartbreaking thing I've ever seen in my 28 plus years of nursing, and I hope it stays the most heartbreaking thing. And I don't see anything worse. But it was a sea of humanity, of exhausted people walking, shouldering yokes with baskets containing their elderly relatives, hugely pregnant women who'd been walking for
Wow.
weeks barefoot with children in their arms. And it was a quiet, solemn progression of people, and it was filled with sadness, yet you could feel the relief that they had arrived somewhere safer.
Finally at a destination.
Yeah, such as it was, right?
Yes.
And but as they came in, we mobilized. We found the most vulnerable people. We supported where we could. We offered water and sustenance. All the women who were visibly pregnant were given a clean delivery kit. And not everyone knows that women who are in a stressful situation will often not go into labor because their bodies recognize that it is not a safe place to give birth.
Hmm.
And so once these women arrived somewhere safe and found a tent to rest in, they often gave birth that night or early the next morning. So the clean delivery kits provided the basic supplies to reduce infant mortality with sterile and clean items. So that was a really key thing that we provided.
Lynn,
Yeah.
I'm going to stop you there because I mean, these are some amazing insights that you're sharing with our listeners, many of whom have only worked here in North America in emergency response. So, when you first told me that story about watching the sea of people approach, I got goosebumps because that can be, first of all, I mean, that is a life-changing sight, but overwhelming. And you said that you did not feel overwhelmed, that you felt energized to assist. And when you say that women were giving birth as soon as they arrived somewhere safe, you are telling the actual truth that babies were being delivered as soon as women had a safe place to sit down.
Absolutely. Yeah. So anyone that looked really pregnant, we would give them a clean delivery kit. We weren't necessarily there for the birth, nor were we wanted to be there.
Right.
Um, they had their own traditional birth attendants, but this gave them the equipment to make them safer.
And can you
So
share with our listeners what a clean delivery kit contains? because
For
many of
sure.
us have delivered, and our delivery kits look very different in a, North American hospital. So I wanted you to share with our listeners what that contains.
Absolutely. So it consists of some twill tape, which is just like a sterile tie to tie off the umbilical cord, a sterile razor blade to cut the cord.
Hmm.
And that's a huge thing in babies because so often if that cord is cut with something not sterile, infection will go straight to the baby or to the mom.
Yes.
Um, and so it has towels, it has blankets, it has and they're all a little bit different depending on where you go, but it often has a wrap, clean fabric for the
Hmm.
mom because if she has blood on her clothing, now she has something clean to wear after.
Yes.
And that's pretty much it. I don't think there's anything else. It's been a while, but
Yeah.
yeah, it's really just the basics. And as simple as those things are, and they're not expensive, they can save lives.
Yes. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
So, it, and I know that was a life-changing moment for you, but I also know that because you've specialized in women's health and reproduction, that often there's limited access to care where you go, and the stigma for women's issues is really high. So, how do you approach that work in a culturally sensitive way, and triaging and managing folks with urgency? What do you believe are the stakes for women in these settings?
The stakes for women are really high, of course. I
Yeah.
mean, like I said, there's high risk of death, having an unattended birth without clean facilities.
Hmm.
And the most important thing that we do for cultural sensitivity is to listen. All the people need to be heard. Women in particular are not always heard. So when we do our sexual and reproductive health care, we have to listen to what the women want, which might not be what we would choose, but what we would choose is irrelevant. So listening to different types of contraception, family planning, their safety concerns. Um, Women need to feel empowered enough to ask for what they want and need. And we have situations where how do you manage a woman who's requesting an abortion after a rape?
Hmm.
And what if she came from a country where abortion is legal and she's now somewhere that it is not legal?
Hmm.
Some medications to treat postpartum hemorrhage are illegal in some countries. So that puts the
Yes.
women at further risk. So we have to have creative solutions and think outside the box to offer the best culturally safe care. And there was a woman in Nepal that came to our clinic looking for birth control, and all we had was condoms. And we offered her condoms, and she said no because everyone will see I have condoms, and then they'll know I'm having sex, which is not something that's
Mm.
discussed there.
Yes.
And so we said, well, we can put them into a little paper bag. And they said, well, no. But she said, when I come out of the clinic, everybody looks at what everybody got from the clinic. So they'll want to look in the bag and see the condom.
Of course. What did you score in your appointment?
Exactly. Yeah. Did you get drugs? What did you get? Did you get Tylenol, which is a
Yeah.
hot commodity? Yeah. So what we did is we took a box that alcohol swabs came in, and we emptied it out, and we filled it with condoms, and we put it in the bag so that she could open the bag and people would see this box that was in English, which they couldn't read, and they're just like,
Yep.
"Oh, yeah, that looks great," and she could tell them whatever it was, and she happily went home with her condoms. And so being aware of that and not saying, oh, don't be ridiculous, it doesn't matter, you're using condoms, but being aware and trying to find those creative little solutions that that will work for them. And she thought it was hilarious. And we all had a good laugh together that this was
Yeah.
the solution, and she was just delighted to have her condom.
That is both hilarious, and we can all identify to, wanting to show this what you've scored, but also recognizing that she's trying to do what's best for her safety, and you're
Mm-hmm.
keeping her safe in the community by doing it in a out of the box way.
Yeah, literally out of the box. Yeah.
Okay, I know that you lived through a 7.3 earthquake during one of your deployments, and I want you to take our listeners back to that moment and tell them what you were doing and what happened.
Yeah, so I was part of the response to the 2015 earthquake in Nepal. And we had set up a small clinic in a valley area that had previously been cut off from any access because there were rock slides after the earthquake and blocked all the roads. So once we were able to get in there, we set up a small clinic for primary health care. And we were on day 4 of operating the clinic when the second earthquake happened.
Oh
Excuse
my
me.
gosh.
It was it was the most bizarre feeling because the earth is not supposed to move. And it was a really odd sensation to feel the earth moving. We'd had aftershocks and we thought they were,
Hmm.
kind of neat to feel, but this was massive. And we saw houses around us just crumble to the ground. Um, and so we immediately just looked to our patients and all of the people around to make sure nobody was in any harm's way immediately. And then as it was settling, we saw these massive rock slides coming down into the valley we were in.
Oh my
And
gosh.
with that, this accompanying wave of dust and debris that was rolling toward us. Um, so we opened all of our tents. We motioned all the clients waiting, everybody that was outside to come in, fill these tents, and we got everyone in and zipped it up. And then we waited until it settled. When we came back out, everything was covered in dirt and debris, our clean water supply, everything. And as the rock slides kept happening, this was a recurring activity. We would see a big cloud coming, get everybody into the tent, zip it up. We handed out face masks as much as we could. Um, that was pre-COVID. We didn't have face masks
Yeah,
at the ready,
exactly.
right? Whereas everybody now has one. But yeah, we did what we could. And after that, we had no communication, and even our satellite phone wouldn't work. So the big concern for us was A, now we're isolated, and
Yes.
B, that was big enough that it'll be on the news and our families will hear about it and nobody will know if we're okay. So
Yes.
that was a concern, but not something we could dwell on. But by that evening, we had run out of fuel for our generators and the road was impassable, so we couldn't get any more.
Lynn.
And so we resorted to using just headlamps. Um, which was invaluable because one woman who'd come to the clinic proceeded to give birth to a
Of
healthy baby
course.
girl. Yes, of course, babies come when they want to come.
That's right.
So I delivered that baby, a healthy baby girl, with just my headlamp. And I never travel anywhere without a headlamp now, not even within Canada. I always have a headlamp with me because they are so useful and you never know when
You never know.
it'll be good. So
That's great advice for our
it's great
listeners. I
advice.
I always travel with a flashlight, but maybe I just need to convert that to a headlamp so that my hands are free.
Well, if you're in the position of needing to deliver a baby, you definitely want your hands free.
Yeah.
So yeah, you should consider that. Yeah.
So, Lynn, you're so calm when you relay this story, but how did you actually feel when, I mean, here in Canada, we every once in a while we're lucky to have a little rumble, but even that is, decades apart. Now, a 7.3 earthquake is massive. So, somebody from Canada, how did that feel? And you relay it at so calmly and coolly, but how did you feel internally during that? And then to open your tent and see everything covered, your water supply contaminated. What did that feel like in that moment?
Um, I think working in an emergency department for a long time prepared me for you just get on with it and you don't dwell on that.
Think on it. Yep.
I'm very action oriented. I've been called a human doing over a human being before. Um,
Interesting.
Yeah, so I mean, we just went into action, and a lot of people in the team are very similar. So we shared all of our food and blankets with the people who couldn't travel back home. We slept fully dressed because we heard aftershocks and
Yes.
rock slide, but we knew they were out of control, so you just roll over and go back to sleep. Like you can't control a lot of it, and fretting about it isn't going to change anything. Um, Come morning, we saw, everyone had departed and gone home. We had massive cracks in the ground, and we knew that our location was not safe. So we did by then, we had some communication. We got word out that we were not injured, but needed help to get out. And eventually we hiked to a location where a helicopter from the Chinese military touched down and took us and some patients and some other NGO workers who'd come to us, took us back to Kathmandu.
And I know that you were separated from many of your belongings during the earthquake, so you just climbed on that helicopter with what you had.
Right. Yeah, a lot of stuff. We couldn't bring a lot, but also
Mhm.
a big crack had come into the ground and my laundry was on the other side of that. So a lot of people, so there's some people in Nepal wearing my pajamas, I'm sure, and some hand knit things, and yeah, and I hope they enjoy them. They're beautiful things, but yeah, you go out with what you can and you prioritize, right? I
Yes.
prioritized having my water filtration pump
Yes.
and my sleeping bag over having pajamas.
And you mentioned something there that I think probably resonates with all of the moms listening, that your family would have seen the news that there was another earthquake, and for your kids, your partner, not being able to be in contact must have been really scary for them. And you knowing that they would be worrying. So tell our listeners what a little bit about what that's like to know that you are out there and folks are worrying about you, and how they cope with that when you're gone.
Yeah, so that's the biggest concern because as you said, I mean, you're always a mom and that's always
Yes.
your biggest worry. And sure enough, they did hear first thing on the radio that morning that there was a second earthquake in Nepal and located right where I was. And they were concerned and the kids went to school and teachers asked them, "Oh, isn't your mom in Nepal? Is she okay?" And they had to say, "Well, we don't know." But the good thing was that once we did get communication out, the Red Cross reached out to all of our families and said that they'd heard from us. They know we're safe, we're okay, we're being returned. And the Red Cross was really good to contact them early on and just let them know that we're on their radar.
And you shared with me, it's very similar to how many of us resilient heroes manage motherhood, but really you have taught your kids since they've been born that you are part of a global community and they are part of a global community, and that your absence is bringing health and wellness and hope to places in the world that don't have that now. And you have said that you rely really heavily on your community back home to support as well.
Absolutely. People would say, "Oh, I wish I could contribute to a response or to some of these needs," and they do. When I would deploy, my daughter was upset the one time that I'd be missing track and field, and I said, "That's okay. I won't go if you don't want me to, but I want to show you what these people are dealing with,
Hmm.
and if you want to help them, the best way for you to help them is to lend them your mom for a month." And she got that and she was
Yeah.
good with that. And the rest of the community, I mean, people would offer to drive kids to different events and they would offer to cut the grass and to share meals and do things just to kind of help pick up the load, for a missing mom.
Yes.
And yeah, so it's a community effort for sure.
Thank you for that. And I love that. Many of us moms who, 24/7, we could be called into anything. We have had to raise our kids to know that the love we have for them is something we're sharing with all of the communities. And like you, we rely on the community at home to help. So thank you for sharing that. Now, you really pay it forward. You have shared that you train local women in all of your deployments. And whether that's midwives or health workers or community leaders, you take that task to heart, and you really build that local female leadership in disaster zones. And I know that you have made that one of the key things that is close to your heart. So tell me a little bit about that.
Um, yeah, women are incredible, and I love connecting with women
Hmm.
around the world. You know, languages are irrelevant. And last year, I led a project that involved nursing education to women in Ukraine. And the nurses, who are mostly women, there were
Yes.
a couple men, I can't say they're all women, but they were so strong, so determined, and so committed to their patient. And together we worked on critical thinking skills, assessments, autonomy, and how to support each other in, the added demands that they had because they're in a conflict situation. The nurses were overworked. They had a lot. They were seeing different situations that they hadn't seen before, a lot of mental
Hmm.
health issues, extra trauma that was new. And while I didn't necessarily teach them new and wild and crazy skills, we reinforced the global community of nurses and how around the world we are all wanting the best opportunities for each other. We acknowledge the strength and determination of all the individuals in the global nursing community. And these women, while they have minimal authority in the system there as
Hmm.
nurses, but they're able to make real changes using best practices. And that's what we focused on. And the opportunity to lead from within and lead by example and opening those opportunities up. And that is critical to improving the care and the well-being of the people they look after and the other women that they work with. Women don't always lead loudly, and
Yes.
that's often their strength, right? We can do a lot from within. We don't get the accolades, but we can make quiet changes from within and we can empower each other, and that changes a community.
And thank you for sharing that. And I know that you have done that across the globe and in every deployment. And when we were chatting about your deployment to the Ukraine, I found that, really interesting is that your focus was really on best practices because here in North America, we have all the tools, all the education, so much at our fingertips. And for you to share those nursing best practices that are not part of their system so that that can grow, build their confidence, share those best practices in the places where they haven't had them, where they've never been implemented. I mean, driving that kind of change from boots on the ground all the way up in those systems is a tremendous contribution.
Not to mention, it was so much fun to meet these women.
It's true.
And we had so many laughs. Despite the language barrier, nurses still have the same weird sense of
Yep.
humor that we could connect on. And there was just so much love in that room as we worked together.
That's amazing. Thank you for sharing. Now, we talk a little bit about personal resilience here on the podcast, and we do that because it's not something that I think day to day we often speak to our colleagues about, and many of us don't have a lot of women colleagues that we work with day to day in EM. So you have faced really unimaginable challenges in the field. You have also seen some unspeakable things. And I always ask resilient heroes, how do they get back to centering themselves to manage the stress in the times of those deployments, but also after? So, when you have the quiet moments, when you return home, when a deployment is over, how do you do that? And how do you get back to Lynn, whether you're in the field and you have a quiet moment and when you come home?
Um, so as I have alluded to before, I almost always have some knitting with me.
Yes, I
And
love this.
I'm not a phenomenal knitter, but I'm usually knitting a pair of socks.
Yep.
Lately, I've been into toques, but knitting is really grounding for me. It's similar to meditation without me needing to sit perfectly still. I can still have my hands moving.
Hmm.
Um, and so I always bring it with me on deployments. It's a familiar rhythmic activity, allows me to be present and mindful. And it's while I'm knitting that I usually solve problems. I deal with my
Yes.
emotions and I get my best ideas. So knowing that I have the knitting with me, it is like a security blanket, like a not yet made security blanket. And so if things get too stressful, I know that I can, try to find some time to just kind of wind down and knit. And I've taught a lot of people to knit on deployments as well.
So which is hilarious because you're not just sharing, your nursing skill sets, your crisis management skill sets, but you're also sharing really a centuries old tradition that women pass down as well, which is amazing and hilarious. Um, you're the first
Yeah,
knitter I know that is knitting on the mountains of Nepal after an earthquake.
it was a great way. We couldn't do anything else. I might as well sit there and knit a pair of socks
Yeah,
while
there,
we're waiting
there
for
you go.
communication.
And Lynn, for
Yeah.
our listeners, do you keep those projects and wear them and those are my whatever socks or toque, or do you give them away to people that are part of the deployment with you?
I'm not fast enough to give them away to people on the deployment. I'm a really slow knitter. Um, but I will proudly have a pair of socks that are handmade in Nepal. But
I
they were
love
made by
this.
me, just very
Yep,
slowly.
yep.
Um, so yeah, I often give my knitting away. I don't have a lot of it myself, because I just knit it for the act of knitting it.
Yes,
And it's an easy way to share some love to people.
I love that. Okay, now I want to talk about when you get home from these deployments, whether it's Mozambique or Nepal, any of the other places that you have found yourself. It is a lot that you're bringing home. Not, amazing wins, but also some heavy baggage emotionally. So, how do you reintegrate into your household after deployment? And emotionally, how do you bring yourself back? And how do you stay grounded?
Um, I'm usually really tired, so I sleep for a while. So that's a
Yes,
big one.
yes.
Um, but if it was a particularly difficult deployment that seems to be haunting me, with some images or situations, sometimes they're things that I can't share with the people that I love because they're just too heavy.
Too much.
So if I'm struggling to move past some of those, I'll often get a tattoo that just kind of holds a space for that, and that helps me close the door on it, and I can just move on. It seems like an odd way to do it, but for example, after Bangladesh, I had a tattoo of a little barefoot, um, for all the people that were walking barefoot as refugees, and that just helps me acknowledge it because you come back and you feel like, did I actually see all those crazy,
Yes.
crazy things? And so I have that as a reminder and to keep those people in my heart all the time. And it just helps me shut that door that chapter for me, is in the past.
Thank you for sharing that. It's such an interesting way to manage those deployments when you get home. And thank you for sharing. It means your body is a canvas of your life's journey.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So we also chat on Resilient Heroes about what it feels like to be a woman in EM. You have been around for a while. You're not new to the field. And particularly in a global context, can you share what have been some unique challenges for you? And, how do you intersect and navigate? How do you navigate that? Because you are, as you have said, entering places where gender, leadership, skill set, and the laws are very different from, where you've grown up. So, first of all, do you get some training before you walk into these situations? Or is there a briefing for you around the political environment? And then can you share some unique challenges and how you managed those?
Oh, absolutely. There is training. We're briefed quite well on what to expect, and safety and security is a
Hmm.
huge focus for us. Um, and deploying to different cultures where we're not always treated equally is
Yes.
challenging. And I have had situations where I felt unsafe with male counterparts. And
Hmm.
some of that is the cultural communication. Um, no, it wasn't a male coworker, but in the situation of Bangladesh, a friend of mine and I, there was a team of four of us, two women, two men. So the women, we went into the ocean to swim. It's a big, beautiful beach, but fully covered with, long sleeves, long pants,
Hmm.
out of respect. But even though we were well covered, because it's not a cultural norm for women to swim there, we were immediately surrounded by a bunch of young men. Um, because it's just different communication. like the signals we were sending out was that's what we were looking for. So
Yes,
being aware of that is huge. And we just have to be careful, and I always have to be aware of it, and there's no sense getting frustrated or angry about that culture. It's just what it is, and I
it
need to
is.
adapt. I'm a guest in their country.
Yes.
But also, coming in as a leader, fortunately I'm a short middle-aged woman, so I'm not really seen as a threat. And the older I get, the more respect I seem to garner as more of an elder. And
Yes.
so that is beneficial for me. And so I use that. I use my soft skills of listening, making people feel heard and seen and valued, and being as non-threatening as I can. And as a nurse, often nurses have to navigate the multiple demands of physicians and patients together. And
Hmm.
we're usually skilled at finding solutions that everyone can accept. And often, if we do it well, all those people think that they came up with the solution themselves. And
I love that.
and this is really useful. So I think a lot of that is your ego and pride needs to be non-existent.
Yes.
And you can do that quiet way that women have of making change. And a lot of it is just acknowledging people and where they're coming from, and showing them that they have value. And that makes a big difference.
I call that planting the seed. Give them a
Yeah.
little tidbit and then let the seed grow while they water their own idea.
People have great ideas and people can get there. And yeah, if we work together and support and collaborate on it, it's amazing. And you just don't take the credit, and that's fine.
And do you think that there's situations in response teams where women are overlooked and underutilized? I mean, you've been able to find your quiet way, but do you think there's a general theme of women being overlooked or underutilized, or do you really feel that depends on the issue at hand, the emergency, or the location?
Yeah, I think it depends. And because I come from a health background,
Hmm.
as a nurse, I do have that respect in a lot of situations because the women are seen as nurses.
Exactly.
And so I have that support, which is good. And I think in the overall humanitarian world, women do have a fair bit of respect. It, of course, it depends on the situation and the
Right.
culture and the context. But what women bring is relationships, and we can find creative solutions, and we rarely see something as being unsolvable. And something else that we have is we have that unspoken connection to other women. And
Hmm.
even if community leaders are men, we know that it's women that have a lot of the decision making unofficially
Yeah.
and have a lot of influence in communities. And so that is often our way of connecting and working with communities in ways that they need. One of my favorite times was when I was hiking in a refugee camp, and it was very hilly. And I had one of those, where you stumble and you keep stumbling, trying to catch yourself so you don't
Yes.
fall. I was going down this hill and I stumbled and stumbled, and I didn't fall. And when I finally stopped, I threw my hands in the air and said, "Woohoo!" Like, yay,
Yeah.
ta-da,
I did
like
it.
it was a show. And there was a woman standing there that lived in the camp, and she was laughing so hard. And our eyes met, and we laughed together because I really was ridiculous. And our interpreter looked at me. He said, "She is laughing at you." I said, "Oh, she absolutely should be laughing
She
at me.
should,
That
yes.
was hilarious." Yeah, and those connections between women, as I walked by, we clasped hands. We have no language that's the same, but we had that connection of being able to laugh at ourselves and see the humor in things. And I love that.
That's a perfect example, and we can all relate to that, stumbling endlessly until you can hopefully catch your footing. And
Yeah.
that goes along with something you mentioned earlier that so much of the communication is nonverbal. And I actually think that we can learn from you saying that because you don't have a choice to, when you have a language barrier, to use that nonverbal communication. But when you said that, I started to think about the truth in that when I'm in an environment with other mothers, for example, and or an EOC with other women, and I can often make eye contact and make a decision based on the eye contact with other women in the environment. And that is something I think that is very unique to us. We feel each other's emotions, and we can recognize a similar sort of approach. And I think, well, you gave a hilarious example. I think that's very true, that we can read each other and respond. And I love that, whether it's in jest or in critical situations.
Yeah, you're so right. We do have that.
So you've talked a lot about, your ability to share your skill sets, globally. Do you have a mentor that helped shape your journey? And if you did, what made them impactful?
I have been so fortunate to have several strong women in my life. Um,
I love that.
yeah, off the top of my head, I can think, Bonnie is a nurse that is older than me that I've deployed with, and she has taught me to try to do all the things. Um, when she said she's going to do this random thing, I was like, why do you want to do that? And she always says, because I've never done it before. And that is an excellent reminder to try and do all the things and have every experience. Maria is a physician that I've also deployed with, and she's showed me that there are many ways of doing things, and my way and my ideas might actually be the best ones, despite my second guessing myself. And she's also my biggest cheerleader when I'm doing anything. She's got my back. She's like, "Oh yeah, you'll be awesome at that," which I think we all need. Women
We
need
do.
other women to support each other and believe in them and their abilities, because we're not always good at believing in ourselves. And Sarah is a person who is so skilled in working with people and calmly approaching and solving so many challenges. And I've learned a lot from her, just in her way of being and her way of leading. So I am extremely grateful for all of these women and every woman I have met, because once women understand that we don't need to buy into this social construct that we're in competition with each other, we
Yes.
are our best support system.
We chat about that all the time. Allies versus enemies, and how working together, bringing each other together, lifting each other up, and supporting each other is the best thing that we can do globally, is support women in every aspect of our lives.
Absolutely.
So let's talk a little bit about how do you see the role of women evolving in global emergency management? And you and I were just chatting before we started the recording, because every news cycle right now brings something more shocking from every corner of the world, really. And so what keeps you hopeful these days after everything you've seen and what we're dealing with now?
Um, I stay hopeful because most people are good people,
Yeah.
and that's true around the world. And I see women stepping into all different roles that weren't necessarily accessible to them before, and they're
Hmm.
being fantastic leaders. And one of the beautiful things about women being leaders globally is that it is a great example for other women to see what can be accomplished. And when we were in Nepal, there was a young 16-year-old woman who was hired to clean the field hospital that we were supporting. And and she was fantastic. And that woman she would be, I think, 26 now. She's now a large voice for women's sexual and reproductive health rights in Nepal. And she's traveled the world with this
Wow.
with this message. And I can't help but think that being exposed to international women leaders facilitated an ability for her to see this as an option.
100%.
Yeah, so every time you have women in those roles around the world, you are encouraging other women, young or old, and acknowledging the fact that this is a possibility.
Lynn, you're changing lives every day. Okay, so for our young listeners, for the ones that are just finishing, school or just in their first job. And this podcast has sparked for them something that they hadn't thought of before. And they want to follow in your footsteps and get more involved in international emergency management. What advice would you give her?
I would say to find what you're really passionate about and pursue that, and follow your heart. Instead of looking at, where the jobs are, oh, I should do this because there's jobs in it. We don't need people in certain jobs. We need people who are passionate about what they are doing and are following their heart. Women are strong, and never forget that. And never stop supporting other women. Find other women to be your system, because we befriend and tend, and we solve problems together. We are strong when we work as a network.
That was amazing. Thank you so much for sharing that. Now, I'm going to wrap up with some quick fire questions for you with no pressure here. So the first thing that comes to mind, I have 5 of them for you. So what's one item you always pack on deployment?
Knitting.
You already shared that one. What's one place that has really left an imprint on your heart?
Nepal. It's a beautiful place. And the people are just love embodied.
Best lesson you've ever learned in the field?
That if something doesn't work, just try it a different way.
Finish my sentence. Resilience means
flexibility and knowing yourself.
Oh, I love that. And now, what's next for you, Lynn? Where are you headed next?
Wherever I'm sent, generally. But next for me is more adventures and connecting with more women around the world. And so I'm currently waiting on a visa for a deployment, because sometimes it's difficult to get visas. So hopefully I'll be heading out for a couple months. But if that doesn't pan out, then I'll just go to wherever the next need takes me.
Lynn, thank you for your incredible work, your unwavering humanity, and for sharing your truth with us today. You are the true definition of a resilient hero, and your story will inspire so many. And to our listeners, if Lynn's journey moved you, please share this episode. Let's keep lifting the voices of women on the front lines of change. Until next time, stay prepared, stay grounded, and stay resilient. The opinions expressed on this podcast are those of the hosts and guests and do not necessarily reflect the views of Buffalo Computer Graphics. All content is for informational purposes only. Are you or someone you know a resilient hero and would be interested in contributing to our podcast? We would love to hear from you. Please contact us at rhpodcast@buffalocomputergraphics.com.